Both sides are wrong. You really made me create a Reddit account for this. To provide some context, I am the friend who attended the party, and I wanted to share my viewpoint while highlighting aspects you overlooked in your original post. To begin with, it is important to recognize that B is a loud person with a vibrant personality, yet she possesses a good heart. I completely acknowledge that she sometimes speaks over others, but everyone has their shortcomings. Rather than addressing your discomfort with her directly, you opted to post on Reddit. B believed she was superior to everyone else and thought she owned her friends. While she never voiced this opinion, I am convinced she feels this way because I have observed her for a long time, and now I have analyzed her behavior. This is not analysis, it is an overreach. Let me pose a question. Does anyone else share this sentiment, or is it solely your interpretation? Because it certainly appears to be that way. She aspires to be the favorite of the teachers, yet none of the instructors really appreciate her since she interrupts them to voice her own opinions. Once more, she is an individual with strong opinions. You know those students in class who continuously enter competitive exams, study subjects ahead of their grade level, and seize every opportunity? That's her. And yes, she enjoys articulating her thoughts. She even delivered a TED talk, which is quite impressive for someone her age. Once again, she never misses an opportunity. By the way, you are someone who is extremely rigid in your beliefs and viewpoints and struggles to accept constructive criticism. It is rather ironic that you are making these claims about someone else. Now let me provide a brief overview of this girl. She talks excessively and seeks attention from everyone because her mother does not provide it. I do not mean to criticize her for that. I mention it because I analyzed this situation. Honestly, I didn't expect you to stoop that low. She confided in you as her friend, sharing personal details, and you chose to broadcast that on the internet. I would also like to point out that immediately following this, you referred to her as an oversharing person. Have you ever considered that she may just be opening up about her trauma with those she believed she could trust? I will refrain from commenting on your fourth-grade experiences with her, as I do not know either of you from that time and lack the context of what truly transpired. I was facing bullying because of my height and my alternative lifestyle, which automatically labeled me an outcast. So she decided to step in and pretend to be my best friend. I tolerated it because I had only 3 or 4 friends back then. I am sorry that you had to endure that, but perhaps she noticed your loneliness due to the bullying and attempted to reach out to you to help you feel a little better. One thing I find perplexing: if you have had an issue with her for nearly 6 years, why have you chosen to remain silent until now? During Founders Day, we once sat together in a corner and B started sharing her traumas. We allowed her to vent because it seemed she had a lot to release. A also shared her traumas, but soon they were overshadowed by BTK's experiences. I felt uncomfortable about it. It resembled a group therapy session, except there was no therapist, just 2 teenagers sitting together while one shared her entire life story. Even if it contributed anything, I stayed silent. I never appreciated discussing my life unless it was with A. First, is she not allowed to talk to her friends when she is feeling low? Second, did it express feeling overshadowed, or is that yet another of your observations? Third, you have certainly talked about your life with others, including me, so mentioning this aspect seems unnecessary unless you are attempting to evoke sympathy from the readers. I will also not comment on the incident at the library, as once more, I was not present. She once attempted to conduct a personality analysis of people, accurately identifying most, but when she misjudged A's personality, she began defending her points, claiming we are concealing our true selves from her and that she can see right through it. In reality, she could not. She merely saw what we wanted her to perceive. Let me gently remind you that joking around and having fun exist. We all engage in these light-hearted activities at some point, attempting to predict one another's futures, personalities, and playing fortune teller with friends. Yet, you needed to overanalyze this as well. Then came January. A and B started spending more time together. My other best friend began acting annoyed with me and started socializing with her classmates. It reached a point where I felt isolated. B began steering conversations toward herself whenever we discussed something else. She would also interject during mine and A's conversations. I once confided in about this, and she expressed sadness. She also pointed out that B was becoming possessive of her, and she was uncomfortable with that. Apparently, B overheard our conversation, and later, when I had to leave school, B spoke with A, accusing me of being self-centered and trying to pull away from her. A was upset. She sat next to me the following day. First, here's another perspective from your other best friend that you probably do not recall. In German class, P, yes, that's you and I were sitting together, raising our hands to respond to the teacher's questions. The teacher consistently chose other students and sometimes me, but not P. I helped her by gently lifting her hand, but she didn't politely refuse. Instead, she shouted at me to stop. Everyone turned to look at us, including our teacher, who wanted to know what was happening. I explained to the teacher that I was merely assisting her, while P replied with, "No, you weren't. Excuse me." I looked down at my book, trying to smile while holding back tears. Then our teacher instructed us to sit apart. P then said, "No, it's okay, ma'am. She is my best friend." Well, not anymore. I got up and moved to another spot. The class concluded shortly after that. I stood up and left, checking on my friend in the other section. By the time I returned, she had taken my lunch with her and was walking to her class. I took my lunch back and placed it on my desk. I was furious that she was trying to act as if everything was fine. I told her to inform P that I did not wish to see her again. Yet, I also felt sadness that she had been my best friend. I shouldn't have said that to her. I attempted for days to reconnect, but she ignored me. Finally, she approached me, and we became friends again. Just friends, or perhaps less than that. This is why she distanced herself from you, and you would realize this if you considered someone else's feelings rather than your own. Second, I was present when B discussed this with A, and that was nowhere near what she actually conveyed. A informed B about your discomfort with certain behaviors, and how you felt because you refused to vocalize your feelings yourself. B listened attentively and stated that she would work on it. She is genuinely willing to have a discussion and reconcile, yet you cling to this one-sided conflict with her that you refuse to let go of. Regrettably, B was sitting in front of us. The teacher allowed us to sit with anyone for the last day, so we resorted to passing notes about the situation. I was frustrated, and now voicing my feelings to my best friend about my discomfort was labeled as self-centered. Regardless, I maintained my distance, and B had the audacity to inquire, "Am I feeling sad because I am stressed, like girl? I have been avoiding you and no one else." The day proceeded. Finally, it was time for finals. We were given the opportunity to talk to A, but of course, B interjected, and yes. Once again, she simply noticed her friend appeared down and tried to engage her in conversation. Now, today is B's birthday. She invited all of our mutual friends and specifically instructed everyone not to inform me about it. A shared the details with me. I'm not so immature that I'd cry over not being invited to a party. You assert you are not a child who would cry about missing an invitation, yet your behavior suggests otherwise. I would also refrain from inviting a friend who is engaged in a one-sided conflict with me. I confirmed with my other friends whether they were attending, and they all replied affirmatively. They also mentioned that B instructed them not to tell me anything, so I explained my side of the story. Unfortunately, even after I argued with her mother expressing her desire not to attend, she was compelled to go because all of my other friends were attending. I didn't mind their attendance, but I felt extremely lonely today. Perhaps she did not want you to discover this because she anticipated you would react immaturely and disrupt her birthday. And yes, we all went because this was overwhelmingly one-sided. I sent a message to a friend's twin sister, another friend of mine, the one who received an invitation, and we spoke. She stated that everyone invites both of them to the party, but today was the first instance. As far as I know, they do not share a close relationship, and I have rarely observed them engaging in conversation. Considering B's mother permitted only a few guests, it makes sense why she was not invited. After the party ended, a friend who attended texted me to check on my well-being. I responded negatively, which was my first mistake. She suggested that I should discuss the situation, but you would all prefer to push it aside. I declined and explained my reasoning. She took it personally when I said I didn't harbor any resentment towards them because they hadn't done anything wrong. She then asked, "Is that why you asked and the other friends and not me if I was going?" I felt horrible. I felt guilty for even bringing it up. I realized I must have hurt her. I clarified that the other friend mentioned you were going when I inquired, which is why I did not ask her. I didn't take it personally, but I am not the only one you've hurt by participating in this behavior. They also included me in a group where they shared photos, which made me feel uncomfortable, so I exited the group. The other friend understands why I dislike B. That was my fault. I created that group and inadvertently added you, but no one shared any pictures or videos before you left a detail you neglected to mention. Story 2. Keep firing, Marine. I am uncertain if this situation qualifies as malicious compliance, but I would like your opinion. My father, who was born in the early 1950s, volunteered and enlisted in the Marines at the age of 17, just shy of 18. He completed a full tour during the Vietnam War, but he was disheartened to discover that, because of the surviving son clause, he would never see combat. He worked diligently as a missile technician and in support roles before being reassigned to a nameless desert base. There, he became part of a special operations group tasked with testing the newest weapons systems developed by manufacturers. One day, the sergeant walks in and requests volunteers to operate a newly developed radar-aimed cannon. It is important to note that although the system was radar-guided, it still required someone to manually occupy the firing chair and pull the trigger. Designed for anti-air defense, they wished to evaluate its effectiveness against ground-based units. The room buzzed with excitement as everyone wanted to participate, yet no one was willing to take their seat in the firing chair. The sergeant yelled at everyone, insisting that someone had to be skilled in aiming a weapon. Suddenly, everyone began to suggest my father, proclaiming, "Get Bobby, name changed for privacy, over here. He's the craziest person who ever fired a gun. Yeah, Bobby will shoot at anything. Bobby is the best shot among us. Bobby regularly tests equipment like this." Ultimately, they passed the responsibility on to my dad. My father, unaware of the implications, enjoyed shooting anything new and classified, now declassified and extremely outdated. The sergeant seized my dad and nominated him for the task. They transported my dad to the testing site and laid out the scenario. "Sergeant, your targets, Marines, are situated somewhere in the distance." He points to a distant dot. "What we have here is a mock contingent of troops, armor, and equipment. Tonight, in the blessed early morning, you men will set up this weapon system as quickly as possible. Then you will fire the weapon with maximum intensity. Is that understood?" Dad and his team respond. "Yes, Sergeant." My dad and his team conduct some preliminary setups and then catch a few hours of sleep. At around 2 a.m., an alarm sounds. Dad's team, half awake but prepared, rushes to the equipment. They connect it to a jeep and drive to the designated position, securing it in place while anchoring it down. The gun powers up, and Dad locks onto his targets on radar. Dad unleashes a barrage on the target. Clack, 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 etc. The gun fires what feels like dozens of rounds. Dad checks the radar screen and appears bewildered. The sergeant inquires, "What in the world happened, Marine?" Dad replies, "Well, sir, I'm not sure. I fired at the target, yet according to the radar, it's still standing, still registering on my screen." The sergeant exclaims, "Did you miss? Did you just get your platoon wiped out? Did you fail your fellow Marines? Did you fail your mission?" He pauses, then continues, "Dismantle IT all and repeat." My dad and his team break everything down and return the system to the base camp. At approximately 3 a.m., the alarm sounds again. Dad's team hastily sets up the equipment once more. They hook it up, drive to the position, and secure the system again. Dad requires his targets on radar and allows the gun to fire once more. Clack, 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 etc. The gun expels even more rounds. Dad checks the radar screen again, still confused. The targets remain visible. The sergeant reviews Dad's screen over his shoulder. The sergeant declares, "You just wiped out your entire battalion by missing, Marine." "I told you to nail the target and you didn't bring one down," Dad counters. "But Sarge, listen, I'm almost certain we are hitting it. By my calculations, the targets should be Swiss cheese by now. I think we should inspect the targets first before we waste more ammunition." The sergeant retorts, You think, Marine. You're ordered to sit in that chair for a third time, and this time we will have a perfect run as I will supervise the entire operation." At 4 a.m., my dad and the team are in complete synchronization. If slowed down, their movements would resemble the grace of a dance troupe. The gun is set up in record time. Dad takes aim and pulls the trigger. Clack, 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 etc. Dad, comfortably seated in the chair, remarks, "Sarge, we're hitting it," but the sergeant interrupts. "Fire Marine," Dad responds. "But sir," cue malicious compliance. The sergeant, interrupting again. "I said fire Marine, fire now." Clack, 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 etc. The sergeant commands. "Fire until you either exhaust your ammo or overheat, am I clear?" Clack, 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 etc. Dad's team reloads the weapon as the ammunition runs low repeatedly until it's exhausted. According to my dad, it was a minute away from overheating. Dad checks the radar. The target remains unchanged. The sergeant throws his hat and binoculars to the ground, not sure why he had them since it was nighttime, and even with the binoculars, the target was invisible. At 5 a.m., with the first light of dawn, they approach the targets. The targets come into clearer view. The targets turn out to be 2 Sherman tanks, 2 half-tracks, and several scarecrow dummies, all initially meant for the scrapyard, with a hastily constructed brick wall partially behind them. Everyone is astonished to discover that Dad's gun had turned them into Swiss cheese. They were able to shine lights through enormous holes in the armor, and the dummies were missing entire sections of their heads and chests, with some even knocked off their posts. The half-tracks were practically destroyed, and the back wall had massive divots, clearly showing that the bullets had penetrated the armor and struck the wall behind. Dad murmurs smugly, "I think it worked, Sarge. Think I hit it." The sergeant angrily tosses his hat to the ground and performs a little rage dance on top of it, shouting profanities repeatedly. Another team was dispatched later that day, not only to clean up the mess but also to run metal detectors over the sand surrounding the targets. The system had accurately hit its targets without any stray bullet patterns surrounding the area. The metal detector team discovered bullets that had passed through the wall. The weapon was ultimately scrapped before mass production could occur. My dad never received any information about why. Who knows? Budget constraints, efficiency, feasibility, it's anyone's guess. The gun's control and targeting system would, however, be utilized in various systems later on until it, too, became obsolete. From that point on, that sergeant assigned my dad to every fire control job and testing system until he was discharged.